we are at Chris's 16th rec anniversary this week. He had his rec 16 years ago. It'll be Friday the 8th. And so what I wanted to do this week is just make a few videos. Hey, make a few videos to just kind of share some different pieces of our journey with you. The way that God has walked with us through the journey. You know, He didn't prevent this journey for whatever reason. That was a major frustration early on, right? He didn't prevent this journey, but what He has done is accompany us on this journey and walk this journey with us. And He's still moving. Chris is actually doing really good for being 16 years out. 16 years out, supposed to be making progress like he's making. The eye contact itself that He's given me right now is huge improvement. The fact that he can focus on something and keep his focus there for a while. But we didn't always look like this. You can't really, I don't know if you can plan for a caregiving journey. I don't know anybody who, you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you say, well, I want to be a caregiver for anybody in my family who gets hurt, or anybody in my family who develops a chronic illness or suffers a horrible disease or something, or whatever might happen. Nobody plans that, right? Now maybe some people go into the medical field wanting to care for people, but no one plans on being a caregiver. I certainly didn't plan for my son to have a wreck at 24 years old and, in a sense, lose his life in a not death kind of way, but a really weird kind of way, right? And so, but here's where we are, but we weren't always here. I taught school for about 8 years, I think, 7 years, a little over 7 years, 7.5 years, something like that. And Chris was actually in college, and he was a musician, played anything the dude picked up. And I'm sorry for those of you who didn't know this rambunctious young man back in the day. He had a great sense of humor. He was a joy to be around. Had this philosophical side that was really fun to just dig into. Ever so often we spent lots of afternoons sitting out on the porch there in Labousse, Louisiana, out on that porch in that shade under the trees, just philosophizing and tearing scriptures apart and asking each other questions and making another pot of coffee. Lots of good memories, about all that. He'd grab a beer and sit down with you at the bar too and talk about Jesus, right? So he loved God. It was in his own way, and he was very active. I don't know how many bands he was in. He played drums for several different bands. He had just started giving drum lessons. He had 1 semester left of college at Northwestern State there in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and I had moved to Chicago. I had gotten rid of everything. I'd gotten rid of all of my stuff, and I had moved to Chicago and was actually headed to Africa, which was my lifelong dream, and was going to help in a Bible school over there with my aunt and uncle, and it was all coming together. My dream was coming together, and that's kind of who we were before this journey started. And then on November 8th, 2008, it all came to a screeching halt. But I have to say, I hope to share this week, that caregiving isn't the end of life, but life may look a lot different. And when life looks differently than what you expected, there's a lot of stuff to work through, right? And caregiving is even hard work. Chris, talk to caregivers. I have a blog for caregivers called dailydevutionsforcaregivers.com. And there's so many different dynamics to everybody's situation. Some caregivers are taking care of parents, some are taking care of siblings, some are taking care of other loved ones. I took care of my aunt for a while in her final 3 or 4 years of her life, along with Chris. That's a whole another story. And so caregiving looks so different for everybody. Chris's total care, he doesn't do anything for himself yet, I'll say, because he's getting there, right? You're getting better every day, aren't you, Bubba? And so he's in therapy 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the week, depending on his health, depending on a lot of the weather, a lot of things. And life looks a lot differently. This is not how we had planned to spend the next decade and a half plus, right? But this is where we are. This is where we've been. And I wouldn't have it any other way right now, huh? Other than you want to jump up and run around a little bit or something, that'd be awesome. But so life looks differently for us, but I have to say that God has been faithful, and that's what I want to share. I want to share some this week about how my faith has been completely redefined. I didn't lose faith, but I did have to redefine it big time. I didn't throw scriptures away. Sometimes I wanted to, but how I ran to God instead, and because I needed somebody to carry me, I couldn't do this by myself. And Chris, I know he has a great. Maybe I'll tell his salvation experience, his story about how he went to Passion and how he really just came to make it all right with God right before would have been in January before the wreck happened in November. 2008 itself was a horrible year. There was one thing after another. This was just the last big thing of 2008. I don't want any more years like 2008. And he is total care, and it takes a lot of my day, most of my day, all of my day, sometimes my nights. Sometimes we spend days or weeks in the hospital, weeks, not really weeks anymore, but a week sometimes here and there. And it strains the emotions, it strains your faith walk, because you want to just lay hands on him and he be healed. Isn't that how it's supposed to work? What do you do when it doesn't work that way? You just trust God anyway, you know. And then on the days that he does really good and he makes progress, and I mean, he's got cool things going on, like how loose this hand is right here. He's moving his arms more, he's moving his legs more. He's actually regaining a whole lot right now. But to get to here, there was a lot of days where he didn't. And what do you do with those days? You just trust God. The days that are great, they're emotional too. You just trust God. The days that are difficult, he's having respiratory problems right now. You hear him? You need a cough. Right? The days that aren't so great, you just trust God. The days that go a lot better, you just trust God. Doesn't it just come down to that? I think that's the key to successful caregiving, is just trusting God. Are you going to cough? I'm going to have to start this whole video all over now. Anyway, so I hope you join us on this journey this week as I just give little bits of the story and actually end up giving you the whole story, and how some of the things that God has worked through this most difficult time in our lives. I thought everything was over. I thought my dreams were crushed, but God did everything he ever promised me. He had just looked a lot different in the in-between, but isn't that true for everybody? He gave Joseph the promise, but he forgot to tell him about the in-between part. He didn't say, oh, by the way, I'm going to get to that part, but in between, your brothers are going to betray you. You're going to be thrown in jail for something you didn't do, and you're going to go through hell to get there, right? He didn't tell him the in-between part. Well, God didn't tell me the in-between part, right? But he still did everything he ever promised me. And I'll maybe share that a little bit later too. But I just want to share our journey this week, and maybe it'll be, what's the fancy word for it? It'll be healing. I'll just say the simple word. It'll be healing for me in a way to walk back through, as much as I say I'm not going to rehearse it this year, as it starts getting closer, that gloom comes, that, oh my gosh, this is almost that date where my life was changed by serious trauma. But look at this. You can make it through, and God will come through it with you. And he will still do everything that he promised. Not one thing in the Bible changed that day that Chris had a wreck. The Bible didn't become untrue. God didn't become non-existent because we had a traumatic experience. In fact, I have learned to know him in a whole new, deeper way, in a whole different way than I could have ever expected to experience if we hadn't walked through this dark night of the soul, as one of my favorites, Oswald Chambers, always said. So we'll share some of those moments, some of the good moments, some of the funny moments. And so keep your eye out on looking for some videos as we share our caregiving journey this week as we come up to the 16th anniversary on Friday. Have a great week. I hope you catch all our videos, and we'll see you soon.